Well, it's good to see everyone. I have not had wine yet. As I was telling Jeremy, I don't have an English accent, as you can tell. But number two is when I have a little drink, I start to sound like a Southerner from like season 3 of White Lotus, if you've ever watched that. So, and it can be really hard to understand me, but it's good to be here tonight. So as Mike was saying, thank you. My name is Adam. I'm a doctor. I'm an emergency A&E physician. By training, also a lifestyle medicine boarded physician as well. I am still licensed in the United States, in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. I live in Washington, D.C., and also here in London, so I live in both. And in 2022, started ABIG Health, which what we do is we help companies commercialize their products and services in the United States. And we work with companies in the United States as well as internationally in Europe and the UK. And we take a concept that's called the total product lifecycle concept. And we work with companies all the way from the point of conception to the point of commercialization. Because we believe that one of the biggest challenges that especially early stage companies have is understanding really the totality of what they have in front of them. They hear about the challenges that people are having. They hear about the timeline, the 10 million pounds, the 20 million pounds that it's going to take to get their product to market or more. And then, or even coming into the United States, sometimes they don't understand the geography or the size of the United States. And one of the things that we hope to try to accomplish for our founders and some of the larger medtech companies that we work for is helping them along that total product life cycle. So from the concept, clinical feasibility, understanding, as we say in North Carolina, will that dog hunt? We will ask that question. Does that product work? Does it work for the right people? Is it really addressing a need or a problem? Number two, we work with companies on navigating the FDA directly. That's quite complex, and now it's even a little more complex, and not a lot of people are working there as much as they used to. Then navigating CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and also private payers. Fun fact, there are 954 private payers in the United States. So it's quite complex when you have to think about how do I get not only coverage, how do I get a payment, and also do I need a code or not? Those are kind of important things. And then not to forget, actually, how do I sell this? And to whom do I sell it? Who are the people there? And so as you can imagine, along that pathway can be a lot of pitfalls, a lot of challenges, and the need for a lot of money. And so one of the things that we want to do tonight is to talk about how do you build a medtech startup. Now, a little bit more background about me of like, why am I talking about this? So yes, I'm an A&E physician, or an ER physician. I have been this will be my 20th year of being an A&E physician. And some people will ask me common questions. Have I seen The Pit on television if you're from the US? No, I haven't. I wrote an op-ed why I haven't watched it. The second thing that people will ask me is, ooh, isn't the ER exciting? Honestly, sometimes the most important thing of working in an emergency department is figuring out how to keep the plates spinning without them falling and breaking, but also, and how this ties to the total product life cycle, how to get that patient from the front door out the back door without dying. It's really that simple. And so for you in the medical device world, how do you take your product and service, get it to the end point with all the chaos that's happening without going through the 2 valleys of death and actually dying in the process? So it's very similar. So I was president of emergency medicine of a $2 billion company at Envision Healthcare, a private equity-backed firm up until 2022. And so I worked a lot with hospitals across the country. HCA was one of the largest hospitals that we worked with, also large here in the UK, but one of the largest providers. So to the panelists' last point, there's a lot of ways that you can commercialize and get in really big if you can really catch a big fish. So we've got this great panel today. So I'm done talking. I'm going to turn it over to the panel to give their introductions, and then we're going to talk about some questions on how to try to do this most efficiently and at the least cost. So now, Jeremy, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeremy Wheeler. I'm the CEO of BioCaptiva. I've been doing medical device startups for 30 odd years now. Many not successful. One very successful. We did have a 9-figure exit to Medtronic from Aircraft Medical. And I would like to say it's not a case of with limited money. I've always been a case of doing it with no money. So I was approached 5 years ago by University of Edinburgh to look at some technology for extracting cell-free DNA directly from biofluids without the need to having to spin it down and put in nasty reagents that destroy the sample and size unlimited and things like that. So I spun BioCaptiva out of the University of Edinburgh during COVID, and in February we launched our first commercial product, and last week we actually shipped our first commercial samples to Biorad, to Illumina, to Thermo Fisher, and to Grail. So it's quite an exciting time for us. So at this moment in time, when I'm feeling good and strong, I look at the next couple of weeks and say, this is really going to be fantastic. If I wake up in the morning with a bit of a hangover, I'm going to be sitting there chewing what nails I don't have. So that's me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Bhogal. I'm actually a clinician and a co-founder and a DAP addresser. I'm an interventional neuroradiologist, so I treat things like strokes, aneurysms, etc., etc. I'm a co-founder of Suraflow, which Chloe presented earlier, as well as several other companies, some of which I can't talk about because they're too secretive. But no doubt you'll come and hunt me down because you'll find me in my pink blazer. So I look at these things from the clinician's perspective, and I'm not that bright. So I look for very simple solutions to complex problems. And what I often see is that clinicians in general love complex solutions to actually quite simple problems. And this is a nice ego boost for all of us. And so from my perspective, I often look, how can I simplify these things? To quote Elon Musk, how can I remove a part? How can I get rid of stuff? And how can I make anybody with any skill set, with rough, good skill set, let's say, be able to do a procedure that otherwise only a select few can do, and thereby leverage my relatively limited intellect to maximally help as many people as possible around the world. That's my general take on life, and I think it's a good one to have. So, hand over.
Natalie?
Thank you. I'm Natalie Pankova. I'm a partner at Zinc VC. Zinc is an early stage venture builder and fund. We invest first checks across health and environment. I oversee the health portfolio and investments. So within health, we go quite broad. Medical devices and medtech is one area that we invest in, but we also invest in biotech as well as digital AI-enabled tools and tech and things like that. Before Zinc, I was with an Italian venture builder and fund, and before that, I was an operator for about a decade across medtech and biotech startups. So in medtech, my focus was on AI clinical decision support. I built and launched a company called MedAdvice for cardiometabolic clinical decision support, now operating across UK NHS and Swiss health systems, and also worked in and am now on the board of Novi, which is an ophthalmic diagnostic and clinical decision support, which is currently multi-million-pound revenue-generating product with pharma, but also launching as a clinical product for the US market in ophthalmology. And before that, my background is as a life science academic in ophthalmology.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you. Unlike everybody else on this panel, I have no science degree. I'm actually an accountant by degree, but I've been in the private equity space for about 20 odd years. I'm part of Truffle Capital. We've been around for 25 years. We've invested in about 28 companies, done 11 IPOs and 10 exits. Our companies have raised about $4 billion. Our thesis is very unique. What we do is acquire technology at the very inception as a license from a university or a corporate. We put it in a patent box. We fund the entire life cycle until phase first in human for medtech and phase 2 for biotech, before which we get third-party investors. So capital efficiency and capital allocation across our portfolio is very important, and we are very frugal. So we know how to build medtechs on shoestring budgets. Our recent successes are a company like Carvilex, which is a consolidation of 3 of our companies: Affluent Medical, which is in the mitral valve space; Caronx Medical, which is in the TAVR space, which has a robot and a guidance software; and Autodrone, which is in your space, Yeah.
He's trying to put me out of business, and I'm really thankful for it, actually.
And our biggest success ever was a company called Abivax, which is in the Crohn's space, where we built the company. We co-founded the company. We put the first check of 30 million. I think right now it's trading on NASDAQ at 10 billion. We exited at about 7 billion. So we are business builders, slightly different from venture builders because we own 100% of the business. We build the team around it. We guide the development process, the regulatory pathway, and even the commercialization. We handhold through everything. And so failure is not an option. Everything must win.
Well, thank you so much. Really esteemed panel here. I love it when they say, I'm not the smart one, or, or I don't know anything about healthcare, and you've been working with 28 different companies. You clearly do. But one thing I tell my students, I teach in a university part-time, is bottom line up front things. So we're going to start with the bottom line up front, the bluff. So what is the most expensive mistake that you have seen a founder make in a startup? Jeremy, I'm going to start with you with a simple question.
Where does the list start? Okay, actually, the most expensive one I've made recently, and I do say recently, is
I mean,
that...
it had to be you. But
Yeah, no. Okay, well, I'm not going to talk about Grail and Gallery, so let's not go there. Hopefully, I'll be their solution, not their problem. Okay, so my most expensive one within BioCaptiva was that when I looked at the original proposition, I looked at what we were trying to solve, and I really went into depth about, is this real? Are people willing to pay money for it? Can anybody else do it, etc.? It all worked out great, got all the answers that I liked, all the things that I've learned over 30 odd years. But one of the things, two things, I really didn't think hard enough about, and that was that our original technology needed to use apheresis. That, in theory, was okay. But what I didn't look into well enough was, what does the actual apheresis market look like as far as access to apheresis, whether or not apheresis companies want to work with you? And that ended up being an absolute dead end because they're really stuck in the mud. The other one, and there will be people possibly here who don't like to hear it, is that I decided to try and do a trial with the NHS. It was a £2 million disaster.
It's okay. We all feel your pain.
Yeah, really. I'm getting palpitations even now.
I'm not working tonight, so
Yeah, Fortunately, because I've been talking really in depth to the market and things like that, I was able to pivot the company. But yeah, those were the two most expensive in my last 5 years. Previous to that, I can say various things about offshoring, outsourcing. There's loads of things, but yeah, those are the two most recent.
what for you?
Yeah, so this is going back a while, actually, with the first company that I was involved with, the first concept that I was trying to take as a product to somewhere. And it was two things. Number one, I wasn't really in control of the team, and the team ended up destroying itself because of one bad investor. So I would classify that as a massive mistake and a big learning opportunity. And then the other thing is it kind of comes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's that, in my opinion, medics and perhaps all people, we have this sort of genetic memory. There are things that are said to us during our life which are embedded at some point. And that piece of information is quite often wrong. But getting people to accept that it's wrong, even when you are literally showing them a picture that this thing that I did that you think is wrong actually works, getting medics to buy that can be quite tricky. And that happened about 10 years ago, and actually a bit longer. And it turns out I was correct, but I was correct, but not at the correct time. So you have to have a lot of things line up in order for success. And so you then have to think, if I want success, what's my barrier? And part of my barrier is the existing belief structure of the people that are going to have to use your product. So how do you get them to understand what you understand? And so there comes a whole bunch of other things, education, writing publications, lots of presentations at meetings, way beyond, way ahead, I would argue, of actually showing your first case. Because people have to have their mind open to the concept before you show the concept. Otherwise, it's, no, I just don't believe you. And you're dead in the water at that point.
Natalie, from an investment perspective, and to you too, Mukul, what is the most expensive mistake that you're seeing as you're working with other founders?
Yeah, I mean, we're a UK fund. We absolutely believe in UK science and technology and the quality and caliber of that. But I consistently see founders spend too much time trying to penetrate UK systems. And this includes companies we didn't invest in, partly for that reason, but also within our portfolio, trying to guide founders away from the NHS, and having launched and built something for the NHS as well, having spent time there, you're not guaranteed to spend less time or put in less effort in another geography like the US, but you're probably going to get a bigger return on your time and money investment. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time and effort in the NHS to basically get nowhere. So that's, I think, is the most expensive mistake consistently seen across companies.
And how about from your perspective?
I think, we are founders of a lot of companies, so all our mistakes, all the mistakes we've made are ours. So first thing is not accepting the writing in the wall. Sometimes you can see that things have moved on, but you're still pursuing a technology that will clearly become redundant. And I'll give you an example is medical devices in bariatric surgery. They may not be relevant anymore with the onset of Ozempic and all these GLP-1s. So that's one example. The second example actually comes very close to what Paul said. We are investors, and we have technicians who actually operate from a day-to-day basis, and they are very convinced they get it right. We as investors sometimes need them to slow it down. And the reason we want them to slow it down is because we want to get the clinical trials right, or we want to have the commercialization right. And for that, the first phase is very important. For them, it's more important to get it early and done with, because that means they've achieved a milestone. So that conflict happens very often. And sometimes that conflict can cause us a lot of grief, because if you get your clinical trials wrong, or you get something wrong in your commercialization phase, or in terms of rolling out, there's a long-term impact on our investment and our value. So those are two key points we come across on a regular basis.
So, it's interesting when you think about those are the most expensive, you are hearing multiple divergent things that are the most expensive. But I want to go back and kind of anchor this back towards the total product life cycle, starting with you, Paul. You highlight something that I think is so critical, and that's the stakeholder engagement piece in getting stakeholders. So let's discuss the clinical feasibility. What has been your experience in ensuring that any new product or service that you are launching or that you are working on is that there's a clinical feasibility and fit? And how do you do that? You started highlighting it, but go more deep in that.
Yeah, so I think the key thing that I've seen over the years is that, I mean, there's the curves and people falling into, early adopters and pioneers and all of this stuff. But from my experiences is that there are a group of people, and you have to really find these people who are essentially very open-minded. They're clinicians who are quite open-minded. And this, I don't want to rag on the NHS too much, but from my honest experience, the NHS clinicians have a mentality of, this is how it's done, it's how it's always been done. Whereas the US physicians are often a bit like, oh, okay, that's interesting, I didn't know that. And I think a lot of what I look for when I'm looking for people with whom to work, particularly in the early stage, I want the person that says, oh, I didn't know that. Because that's your door to saying, yeah, you didn't know that. We know a bunch of stuff here. This is the science that's going forward. This is why we're doing it this way, et cetera, et cetera. And you find those people, and then they end up, if the product works, obviously, they're your champions. They go out and do the fighting for you, because quite often those people have done it before. And so everyone's like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, you could be wrong this time, but you weren't wrong 10 times previously, right? And so they help pull the investment in as well. So everything ends up sort of falling into their sort of, their cape of goodwill, as it were. And so finding those people is the most important thing.
So Jerry, to kind of that point around the clinical conceptualization phase, what is the cheapest way that you have found to be able to do that, to ensure that, as I said earlier, that dog will hunt?
A lot of humility, a lot of going out, a lot of talking to people. So what I'm sure almost everybody here has or will come across technology that is out of university because it's very clever. Well, just because it's very clever doesn't mean it's worthwhile. Because typically when these ideas are developed, it's because there is this great goal of we are going to save humanity. Well, if nobody's willing to pay for it, trust me, you're not saving humanity. So, and one of the things with BioCaptiva, because of COVID, that I underdid, which I normally do, is if you take the view that designers typically take, and that is, okay, I've got an idea where I think I can help. And then you go and sit and you go and look in that environment and you look at how everybody is working, how everybody is interacting and everything that everybody needs. And you talk to people and you don't say, this is what you should do. You say, tell me, what are your problems? What upsets you? What costs you money? What's killing your patients that you don't write down? And that's the big thing, and it's very cheap to do. It takes time, and you got to make friends, and you got to be a little bit charming, and you've got to buy a lot of cups of coffee and things, but this is no big deal. But it's go out and listen and really drill down on the problem that you are looking to solve and that needs to be solved. And then once you've identified that, talk to as many people as possible about, okay, and who is going to pay for that solution. But as I say, these things, they take time, they take focus. You want to be getting on with the exciting technology because you think it's really cool and all this sort of thing. But if you go and you do that work in the first place, it allows you to, and again, with BioCaptiva, I pivoted the company 18 months ago because whilst I was having these problems, I was having these conversations and I was listening and looking and thinking and talking all the time.
Natalie, similar question to you. As you and I were talking earlier, one of the challenges here in the UK versus the US is the funding environment is worse. And secondarily, so there's less funding for medtech devices as there are in the United States, but you also are working with early stage companies. So what would you say is advice that you would give them on a way to reduce their expenses in this early stage kind of investigation of launching their company and product market fit?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jeremy. I mean, I think talking to as many people as possible, but I would take that kind of another step further as somebody who's been on the founding team, actually spending time in the clinic, spending time with the clinicians, sitting there. I spent hours, days, weeks just sitting with the clinicians. If you can get them to agree to let you in, and it might take a lot of investment up front of your time and effort. You might need to sign contracts, et cetera. But if you can sit with them and understand their workflows and really, really kind of understand where the pain points are and where your technology can fit, what the outcomes might be, what you can change, I think it's going to be huge returns on investment down the road. So it's a little bit of investment up front to really spend that time and understand the day-to-day, the workflows, and then, again, augment that with talking to as many people, confirming, validating the hypotheses or invalidating the hypotheses. Try to kill your hypotheses rather than validate them, because that's actually going to get you there faster. And then also making sure that you're not just talking to the users, because users are going to give you one perspective, but actually talk to the payers, the people who are going to pay for the technology. The sooner you can do that, the sooner you can, again, validate or invalidate some of your hypotheses around what you're building. building.
I think that's such an important point. So as you're in the process, the early stage of development, you're actually looking to the end of the life cycle of who are going to be the users, who are going to be the buyers.
Absolutely.
Does someone want to pay for it? Do they not? I want to speak about regulation now and talk about how regulation is the space where dreams sometimes go to die, and also where budgets can explode significantly. And so when we think about regulation, we also talk about the FDA as the place that you want to get through. And true, but you also have to think about the regulation around Medicare, Medicaid, and other types of well, not a regulation, private payers, but Medicare, Medicaid do have regulatory components with it. So what are some of the things that you think, Mukul, I'm going to go to you about this first because you're working with companies in totality around the regulatory side. How are you advising them on the money that they should be thinking about setting aside, but also how to do it in a stepwise process so that they're not burning capital too early, but also planning?
So from our perspective, we have a common shared services center which actually maps out processes for all our companies on the medtech side in terms of what the regulatory pathway has to be. And we are the capital owner, so we can leverage exactly, we do milestone payments. So, we identify what the process is, what the effective cost of the process is. We can go to back-end CROs and negotiate a better pay. So we are very careful. We have great capital efficiency on that. And the advantage we have is the levers change. Sometimes we prioritize product A and company A over product B and company B. But you're right. This is a pain point for my operating partner because costs can run away. And costs can run away because the technicians believe that they need to do everything in order to get the FDA approval. We were just about to get our FDA approval for Tavipile Soft, and there was a conversation that happened in which FDA said, "Do you want it to be right, or do you want the approval?" And we're like, "We want the approval, right?" And so they said, "Well, we think you're all sorted, but you need to get somebody who sees, can any viruses infect your software?" And we're like, "We'll get one of these reports in about 24 hours." And in 36 hours, we had our FDA approval. This is Donald Trump era, by the way. So the idea is you've got to have the right team that focuses on getting the process as streamlined and is very cost conscious. And we have an operating partner, a CFO, who looks across all our companies. And we have a specialist who looks at all the regulatory pathways and defines them. We can literally go through every product in my portfolio, have a look at where they are, what it costs, and what is from a shared services center, what is a third-party provider, and what the team would cost me to execute that. So,
Paul, I want to talk about clinical evidence because that's required for regulatory processes. But one of the challenges that we often see with founders is they are only thinking about the FDA as the approval process, and they're designing studies for the FDA, not thinking that they need to be designing studies that are also for the end user or the end payer. What are some of the strategies that you've started to employ in your company and the one you're in now on clinical evidence generation to ensure that you're navigating those different regulatory spaces with efficiency?
Mostly asking people smarter than me. To be blunt, the things that you need for the FDA are probably different to EMEA, gonna be different to MHRA. Japan is quite a large payer for certain types of diseases as well. They might be a good option. So mostly, as we've discussed previously, I just look to speak to people who know way more than I do. And I'll put my opinion in with regards to trial design where I think it's relevant. Otherwise, I just keep my mouth shut and just listen. Because I'm not the expert, and I don't need to be the expert for everything. And as someone mentioned earlier, particularly for the US, you've got a wealth of knowledge. And these people love to share their knowledge. Like, you just ask them questions, and they're more than happy to just talk to you. Like, it's phenomenal, in fact. So, at least for the FDA, I think there are a lot of people that can help you, whether it's a biotech, whether it's a medtech. So yeah, just again, networking, speaking to people, finding out who has worked with whom and what has worked, and then just pulling them into your team if you can.
So Jeremy,
Can I just add on top of that, because this is another area where also the buyers need to be engaged, because it might be one case that you get approval, but actually you might need to hit a certain benchmark for the buyer to actually purchase your technology. So I was working with a diagnostic company that was working on a microbial assay, and they basically they wouldn't buy unless it hit a certain sensitivity of like 92%. So it's regardless of what it was a European company happened to be, regardless of what, the CE approval, the CE mark that you got and the test that you've done to reach that CE approval, the hospital isn't going to buy because of certain regulations, because they needed to hit a certain benchmark. You're not going anywhere. So again, it's just engaging the buyers as much as the regulators and the users.
Actually, I'd like to add one more thing. It's very important because we, for example, work a lot with interventional cardiologists. At the very inception, we start working with them and then set benchmarks in what is acceptable when we roll it out from a commercial perspective. So you're right, we have an FDA objective, but that is purely from the focus of getting FDA approval. But if that does not meet the accuracy requirements of this is AI-driven software for an interventional cardiologist, it is not going to be rolled out. And if it's not going to be rolled out, it's never going to be adopted. So,
it's that, and I want to make sure that people understand that, just in April, the CMS and FDA jointly released the RAPID program, and was thought, and they would pause the TSET program. And there's some thought that if something gets breakthrough designation, it makes it through the FDA, then it's immediately going to get coverage through CMS. But your point is the one that's really critical, is that even if you get, and that's just a press release right now, there has not been a law made, there has not been a regulation, it has not gone through public commentary. This is your time, by the way, to make commentary on that if you're a US citizen. Just saying. However, because it's a part of CMS, or if you're part of a company that's part of the United States. That said, you still, from a commercialization standpoint, have to get it clinically adopted. You still have to get it through private payers. You still, at times, have to get it through other type of coding mechanisms. So just because you may have coverage, that does not mean that you have commercialization. It does not mean you have adoption. It's a very, very important point there. It's something that we have been dealing with and working with our different clients on. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to make sure that we also think about, I just mentioned that, that the life cycle doesn't end with the FDA approval or even commercialization, or excuse me, with coverage through CMS. So from your perspectives, if you're a capital light founder, Jeremy, I'll go to you, and you're thinking about commercialization, what builds real exit value?
Well, okay, so real exit value is people validating your technology out there in the field, doing real things, especially if you've got if you're in the IVD space or whatever. Basically, you can go out, you can do your own clinical trials, and you can have amazing results. But until other people can replicate that, I wouldn't say it's meaningless, but it's less meaningful. So there's that. And people handing over cash to buy it and then buying it again. It seems obvious, but it really matters. And whether you're not on whether you're actually in the buying list at Roche or wherever. So those are a couple of things. And of course, the other thing is make sure your patents are really well screwed down.
So last question, rapid fire for all of you, and it's about de-risking. So I'm going to start, Mukul, with you. So what is the cheapest way to de-risk a medtech company?
The cheapest way to de-risk a medtech company is having a product that has multiple applications.
Natalie?
I think getting user and buyer buy-in at the very beginning and really understanding that you're building for the buyer.
Paul?
The right product at the right time with the right team.
Jeremy?
Design control. Really spec what you're actually trying to do from every different level. User, buyer, put that into your design criteria and keep going to that. Don't let yourself wander off going, oh, wouldn't it be nice if? That doesn't keep yourself focused.
So I think there's really great comments. I really appreciate everything that you said, and think there's a lot of value both in the previous panel about U.S. commercialization and some of the things that we've said here. I think some of the key take-home messages are, number one, it's extraordinarily expensive and it takes a long time. You have to be prepared for it. But something that I continually hear and hearing from people that have been there, done that for a couple of years, people that are investing for several years, et cetera, is start early with planning and understanding how you navigate along the way and get people around you that are smart. And you said something, you said doctors in the US like to try new things. The 15,000 doctors I was responsible for, that was a different story, even in the ER. But make sure you do engage stakeholders early on across the entire product lifecycle. So, any questions for the panelists?
Thank you. So if you are on a budget and you want to get to the States, there's I don't know whether it's an urban myth or a reality about setting up and headquartering in the States. I'd just like your views on that.
I would love to talk to that because I've tried it in several different ways. I have, in a previous world, I have set up a US direct sales organization out of Houston. That is theoretically easy to set the company up, but then when you get into employment law and employment pay in the US, it's a bit of a minefield.
It's a lot more expensive.
Yeah,
just a lot.
it's really complicated. Even if you think, oh, I'll just have a rep in California, I'll have a rep in Philadelphia, whatever. Every single one gets paid differently, taxed differently. That's a real pain in the butt. Right now, I have my BD team based as contractors in the US. That works really, really well. It's all down to the right people. But as that stepping stone, it's a good way. But the reality is, I think, as mentioned on the previous panel, is you got to have feet on the ground in the US.
Sorry, just a follow-up, sorry, to be greedy. So I was actually also thinking in terms of attracting investment, because we've all heard today that US investors have a bigger appetite, but they are actually perhaps a little bit cautious about investing overseas as well, because perhaps they don't understand, or they, a bit scared of us Brits or what have you. So some of the advice that I've had is set up a like a Delaware company, and you'll get some tax advantages for the investors and yada, 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 and that'll make it easier. Is that a real thing?
Okay, Delaware is a tax play, but I don't think that the US investors are shy from investing in European companies. There are two reasons behind it. Firstly, there's a perception that we do innovation on the cheap. Second thing is that we have significant amount of undiluted funding the Americans don't have. So there is a better play to it. So in terms of sourcing innovation, there is American money in the market, and they are fair investors. They don't invest. They won't not invest in you just because you're European and something else is American. They will look at the product and the viability of that product in their market. So I would not discount it. Also, on the second page, on setting up a US company, we're just rolling out a commercialization of one of our products in the US. We've got right now the sales staff is European. They go across. It's working out fine. But at some point, when we start scaling up, real scaling up, we will have people on ground, but where we don't know that yet. But that's a strategy that works through as and when adoption works out. If one region adopts the software, and there is a network there, we probably would start with having footfall there because it pays for itself.
I would just add that it does create some additional complexity for them, and they might just not want to do it. So you have to be competitive enough for them to kind of go over that barrier of investing in a non-US domiciled company. If your innovation is really exciting, if you've got really amazing data, you'll be able to raise investment anywhere, basically.
But clinical adoption is important. And so thinking about US-based key opinion leaders, US-based pilots beyond clinical equivalency and scientific study equivalency and patient equivalency here in the UK or in the EU versus the US is important to be thinking about. So whether or not you decide to make a decision on a business case for starting a company in Delaware, you should be thinking about Americans talking to Americans. And that is going to be a really important thing for you. All right, do I have time for one more? Oh, sorry.
Yep, thanks for the panel. I'm Dr. Jean-Marc Fagali from WeWalk. We make assistive technology for visually impaired people. And actually, Jeremy, this is a question for you. Because funnily enough, even though we're headquartered in London, our product is reimbursed in Germany. And we're thinking, well, why not get reimbursed in the UK? But you mentioned the NHS clinical trial was a 2 million mistake. Why?
Jeremy.
I am going to have to choose my words very carefully. Actually, so I will tell you exactly what happened. Despite the unit I was working with, even being connected to the University of Edinburgh, we went ahead and I kind of forced things along. They were incredibly inefficient for a start. And okay, we were about to start our trial, and I was about to do a press release. On the morning I was about to release the press release, a middle manager sent me an email that said, yeah, we looked at our resource. Yeah, we can't do it. There's no accountability. I have very, very strong views about the NHS, but that's another matter. There's no accountability. And the other thing that the NHS repeatedly did was they threw unnecessary people into meetings in order to try and bill us. They saw us as an absolute cash cow. I advise and I talk to and I help other young companies. And without fail, if I see any plans for an NHS trial, I will either say don't do it or I will walk away. I will not be involved with another one ever.
If you don't mind if I just jump in a little as well. One of my concerns as someone that is involved with research in the UK at his hospital, blah, blah, blah. Research oftentimes is touted as this wonderful thing that the NHS wants to do, but it can't deliver it. There is not the sufficient infrastructure to support it. You know, you'll have the clinical trials unit, but, you know, it might need 5 people, but it's got 1, you know. And so that's the problem. And having worked in Sweden and having worked in Germany, I can tell you it's not like that there. You know, it's just the processes and the infrastructure that is required to effectively run and deliver clinical trials, I think is better in other countries, having worked in these other countries. And I'd say that having not worked in the US, but know a lot of US physicians, if they want to get something done, damn, it gets done. And in the UK, we have all of the bits, but they're not joined up. And this is a critical failure of this life sciences policy that this government, and whichever government wants to sort of push forward, they're not doing joined up thinking. So you just get this mess, which we have to work through.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, Paul, Natalie, on that exciting note. Mukul, no. But it's all good to be with you. We'll be around, of course. Michael, anything else? No, being truthful and just to your point is a really, really important thing for everybody here. Michael, anything else?
Thank you very much, everybody. I don't know about everybody else in the room, but a round of applause, please.